royal nursery of Black Moon Palace stood bathed in light on the final night of the 7-night blood moon cycle since the heir's birth, the court already kneeling in silence, the priestess holding the moon bowl steady in both hands. The child's true mother, Kale's mate and queen, had died bringing him into the world 7 nights earlier, and by Draven custom, the newborn had been placed in the care of Lady Lysandra Heir, the late queen's own cousin by marriage, who had assumed temporary Luna authority over the household during the mourning rites, as was proper and expected. No one in that hall thought to question why a Heir woman had been given 7 unsupervised nights inside the royal nursery. That, in the end, was precisely the point. Lysandra stood at the center of the room, a swaddled child pressed against her chest, wrapped in silver-threaded cloth. Before her stood the blood moon cradle itself, carved from moon ash wood, etched with the wolf spirits and oath marks of every Alpha King who had ever ruled the Draven line before him. Alpha King Kale Draven crossed the room toward it. By the old law, all he had to do was rest his hand upon the cradle and speak the child's name aloud, and the boy would become heir before the moon and the throne alike. The nursery doors burst open before he reached it. Mara Wren, the old royal nurse who had raised 3 generations of this family before this child could grow teeth, came through them at a pace no one expected from a woman her age, her hands still dusted with flour from the kitchens she had been reassigned to the very morning after the birth. She had objected, quietly but firmly. When Lysandra dismissed the standing nursery staff within hours of the queen's death and brought in her own household women instead, Garen Heir had told the grieving king that the old nurse's presence only confused the new arrangements, and Kale, drowning in his own grief, had let the matter go without a second thought. It was the first mistake of many that night would force him to answer for. The court turned on Mara at once, offended by the intrusion. Garen's voice cut through the room first, accusing her of defiling a sacred rite. Mara did not flinch. She pointed straight at the child in Lysandra's arms. "That child is loved," she said, "but he is not yours." Laughter rippled through the hall. A noble near the back muttered that the old woman had finally lost what little sense age had left her. Kale felt the weight of every eye in that room settle on him, and something in his pride answered before his judgment could. "Old wolves hear ghosts," he said coldly. "When the moon grows thin." Maera's face did not change, though something in her eyes did. "Then touch the cradle, my king." Kale set his palm against the moon ash wood. The oath marks carved into its surface split open like old wounds, and red moonlight welled up from them, thick and slow, the color of something bleeding rather than glowing. Lysandra pulled the child tighter against her chest. The hall fell utterly silent. "The cradle does not choose an heir for this court," Mara said. "It only stops an oath being sworn over a lie. It is bleeding because of the lie around him, not because of anything the child himself has done." Kale's first order, once his voice returned to him, was to seal the nursery. His second order, born entirely of anger and the shame of having been made a fool in front of his own court, was to have Mara held as a suspect. Garen demanded she be tried for treason before the hour was out. Captain Oren, standing at the king's shoulder, obeyed the order to restrain her, but did so with visible reluctance, quietly posting his own men, rather than Heir guards to watch her. A small mercy Mara would not forget. Mara did not beg. She only said, "Let me show you what your court forgot to look at." She lifted the edge of the child's swaddling and showed him the knot. "A royal heir is bound in the triple moon knot," she said. "This child is bound in the double vine knot of House Heir." She showed him the birth ribbon next, where the silver wax seal had been replaced with one that did not quite match the old royal stamp. She began to hum an old Draven lullaby, and the baby in Lysandra's arms did not stir to it, did not answer the rhythm every wolf-blooded infant in this family had answered since, before living memory. "You are measuring my heir," Kale said, anger still thick in his throat. "By knots and lullabies? I measured you by the same things," Mara answered, "before you had teeth, my king." The words landed harder than she likely intended. "I do not know who did this," Mara admitted, I only know this child was placed where he did not begin. She explained the cradle's true limits before anyone could mistake her meaning. It did not identify blood by simple proximity, and it did not investigate anything on its own. It answered only when a reigning alpha attempted to bind a child into the royal succession under oath. Red light marked a false oath. Silver light, should it ever appear, would confirm only that a child carried the reigning bloodline, nothing more. Nothing about guilt or innocence beyond that single fact. Everything else would have to be found the ordinary way. KL ordered the nursery logs brought to him. The nursery bell had not rung at the true hour of the birth. The bellkeeper's duplicate tally recorded a different time than the midwife's written log, whose ink was clearly fresher than it should have been. A page had been torn from the guard's watch record. Mara, pressing further, asked where the midwife who had attended the birth now was, and was told only that the woman had left palace service the same week, quietly, without the usual formalities. No one could say where she'd gone. A young nurse, when finally pressed, admitted in a shaking voice that she had seen one of the Heir household women carrying a bundle through the servants' passage during the hours. The birthing wing was supposed to be sealed. She had said nothing, till Kale stood before her and promised plainly, "No servant loses their tongue or their hand for speaking honestly in my nursery tonight." Mara found at last that the royal swaddling cloth was missing a strip of moon thread, cut cleanly from its edge. The moon bowl, she explained, did not point the way like some enchanted compass. It only made the remaining thread hum, faintly when brought close enough to its missing match, a narrow, short-ranged thing, useless without the gate record, and the nurse's account to first narrow the search. Combined, the three pointed toward the East Market, the poorest quarter beyond the palace walls. Kale understood that marching an army down there might get a stolen infant killed before anyone found him. He went instead with Mara, Captain Oren, and a small handful of trusted guards. No banners, no royal procession. The East Market smelled of rain and wood smoke, narrow and crowded even at that hour. They found Nella Reed at a goat milk stall, a baby named Rowan bundled against her shoulder. She did not kneel when she saw who stood in front of her. She stepped back instead, certain he had come to take the child and punish her for keeping him. Kale told her, gently, that the boy might be his son. "If he is yours," Nella said, "then love him. But do not make me sorry I kept him alive." 7 nights earlier, after a hard storm, she had found the baby beneath the rowan tree at the market's edge, wrapped in cloth, far too fine for anyone in that quarter to own honestly. A midwife had told her the child's mother had died in labor, and no one had come to claim him. Nella had not entirely believed her. The cloth was too fine despite its torn seams. The midwife would not look the baby in the face while she spoke. A carriage had waited nearby with its crest covered by dark cloth. A silver birthing clasp had fallen loose from the wrappings that night, bearing a nursery number from the palace itself, and Nella had kept it, uncertain why, only that something about the story had felt wrong enough to keep proof of it. Mara examined the moon thread still caught in Rowan's blanket and found it matched, thread for thread, the strip cut from the royal swaddling. When Kale let out a low wolf call, Rowan stirred faintly in response, not conclusive on its own, but enough to make the king's hands shake. They brought Rowan back to the palace in secret and set him near the cradle's broken shard. Silver moonlight rose from the shard, quiet and warm, enough to leave the priestess speechless. It confirmed only one thing, that the blood in this child's veins was Draven blood, but combined with everything Mara and Nella had gathered, it was enough. Kale understood his son was alive. Before the relief could settle, a cry rose from the nursery down the hall. Elian was crying too, the child still resting in the royal cradle, frightened the same as any infant handled by strangers. Mara watched Kale's face and said the thing that would define the rest of that night. "One child was stolen from you. The other was stolen for you. Neither of them chose the theft." Kale could no longer believe this story ended simply with finding his son. He now had 2 children to protect from a court already sharpening itself to turn them into symbols. Lysandra discovered that Nella and Rowan had entered the palace and moved quickly to reshape the story. Before the full court, she called Nella a kidnapper, Maera a witch nurse, Rowan a market bastard. Garin declared the entire affair a plot to weaken House Heir at its foundation, and explained, with the calm certainty of a man who had planned this for years, that the ancient cradle rite was little more than superstition dressed as law. Once Elian was named through it, House Heir would hold the regency of an underage heir through Lysandra for a full decade, more than enough time to secure the Moon Council's loyalty before anyone thought to question the bloodline again. Captain Oren brought Cale the political reality bluntly. If no heir was named before the 7th night ended, House Heir could summon the Moon Council. 3 border alphas were prepared to withdraw their oaths. Heir guards had already begun gathering at the palace gates. Lysandra, for the first time, let something genuine crack through her composure. She held Elian tighter and said he was her sister Seraphine's son, orphaned and frightened, and that whatever else she had done, she had never wanted the boy himself harmed. Mara's answer was quiet and final. No, I am trying to save him from the people who used him. Garin proposed removing Elian from the cradle chamber for his own safety, a suggestion that, beneath its careful language, meant erasing evidence and turning the boy into a hostage for whatever claim House Heir intended to make next. It was Captain Oren, loyal in every sense that mattered, who offered the compromise that nearly worked. Enter Elian's name into the civil record tonight, provisionally without the cradle's binding oath, he said quietly, to hold the peace through till morning. Protect Rowan in secret. Let the priestess and the Moon Council sort the rest once the sun rose and cooler heads could prevail. He did not say it out of betrayal. He said it because he feared open truth, tonight, in this room, might get both children killed in whatever violence followed. Cale looked between the 2 paths in front of him. For one long moment, he leaned toward the compromise. Mara stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. A lie named under the moon, she said, becomes a law men will kill children to protect. A provisional record tonight becomes a birthright no one dares question by morning. You know this. You have always known this. Cale looked at Elian. He looked at Rowan. He looked at Nella, who had asked him for nothing but honesty. And then he looked at Mara, the woman he had laughed at only hours earlier. He turned to the priestess. Bring both children to the cradle. The hall erupted in protest. No child will be punished in my nursery tonight, Cale said, over all of it. But every adult who lied in this room will answer for it before dawn. Guards formed a close ring around the cradle itself. Healers stationed at the chamber's edge. Every weapon in the room surrendered at Cale's order before the doors were opened fully to the court, the moon witnesses, and the priestess. Cale set his terms plainly. No one would call Elian a fraud. No one would lay a hand on Nella. No one would drag Mara from the room. No child would leave that nursery until every adult's testimony had been heard in full. Mara presented the evidence first. The double vine knot, the missing silver wax seal, the mismatched nursery bell, the servant gate record, the young nurse's testimony. The bellkeeper, questioned directly, confirmed his duplicate tally without hesitation. Nella produced the silver birthing clasp. Then the cradle spoke in its own limited way. Elian was brought close to it, and the oath marks bled red moonlight once more. The child himself, showing no pain beyond an infant's ordinary discomfort. The cradle does not reject him, Mara said. It rejects the lie that named him. Rowan was brought close next, and silver moonlight rose gently through the moonash wood, quiet and warm, needing no spectacle to make its meaning plain. Guards were sent at last to the old infirmary wing, sealed off for a week under Garin's private orders, where the missing midwife had been kept quiet rather than silenced permanently. A mercy Garin had not extended out of kindness, but out of caution. She confessed only after Cale promised, before the entire court, to protect her family and to hold both children blameless in whatever she said next. She admitted that Garin had ordered the child swapped, that Lysandra had known, that Rowan had been carried out through the servant's gate that same night on Garen's word, and that she had been told, in a phrase she had not understood until much later, that before the 7th moon the ash branch must be removed, and the vine laid in its place. She had understood well enough what it meant only once she was asked to end the ash branch's life herself, and had not been able to do it, leaving him instead beneath the rowan tree at the market's edge. A guard produced the torn page from the watch record, found hidden in the Heir family chambers, bearing that same coded phrase in Garen's own hand. The court turned on Elian immediately, a noble crying out that the child himself was the fraud. "He is not a fraud," Cale said. "He is an infant." The fraud stands upright and speaks. Garen attempted, even then, to order the Heir guards to remove Elian from the room. Cale placed himself between the cradle and both children. No child leaves this room as a weapon. The weight of his wolf settled over the nursery, aimed squarely at the grown men and women who had used 2 infants to secure a throne. Garen was taken into custody before the assembled moon witnesses. Lysandra was stripped of her Luna authority on the spot and remanded for a full moon trial of her own, her private grief for her sister's son noted, but not accepted as justification for what she had allowed to happen to another woman's child. "Blood gives me an heir," Cale said. "It does not excuse me from protecting the child my enemies used to steal him." Before the blood moon set that night, Cale named his true heir before the full court. Several nobles objected to the name itself, given by a market woman rather than chosen by royal custom. "It belonged to my son," Cale said. "During the 7 nights this palace failed to protect him. It will not be taken from him now." The heir was entered into the royal record as Rowan Draven, with Nella Reed named formally as foster mother of the heir. Her own name written permanently beside his, an independent household, granted under the crown's protection, and compensation offered plainly as gratitude rather than payment for silence. She stood beside Cale during the naming itself, Rowan settled against her shoulder rather than a stranger's arms, because Cale understood by then that recognition did not require separation. Elian Heir was declared, protected child of the crown, his Heir ancestry recorded honestly rather than erased, placed under Maera's own guardianship in a modest household of trained caregivers. With supervised contact allowed to Lysandra, pending the outcome of her trial, and the right to learn the full truth of his birth once he was old enough to carry it. Cale further ordered that the 2 boys grow up knowing one another, not as rivals, but as children joined by the same crime committed against them both. Cale turned to Mara and bowed his head before her. "You warned a king while everyone in this hall laughed. I laughed too. I was wrong. The office you were removed from is yours again, if you'll have it, and the authority to audit this household belongs to you for as long as you want it." Mara did not smile in triumph. "Then remember it. The next time a quiet voice tells you the moon has shifted." In the days that followed, Cale issued immediate protections for every nursery servant who had stayed silent out of fear, and submitted permanent reforms to the Moon Council for ratification, independent witnesses drawn from at least 3 houses at every royal birth. Nursery records split under joint custody so no single house could hold them all again, and crown protection guaranteed to any household worker who reported wrongdoing in good faith. Lysandra and Garen were sent before the Moon Court to answer for what they had done. A year later, the cracked cradle still stood in the nursery, its bled marks left unrepaired as a deliberate reminder rather than an embarrassment to be polished away. Rowan had learned to walk between 2 households, Nella's and the king's, without anyone in either treating it as a scandal. Elian visited some afternoons, safe and steady under Mara's roof, the 2 boys too young yet to understand what had once nearly been done to them both, which was, by every measure that mattered, exactly as it should be. By dawn on that first night, the kingdom no longer remembered Mara Wren as the mad old nurse who had disrupted a sacred rite. It remembered her, instead, as the woman who had carried the truth in her memory, long after a kingdom had been ordered to forget it. Was Cale right to risk the kingdom by exposing both children before dawn? Or should he have accepted Captain Oren's provisional lie to keep the peace one more night. Tell us what you think in the comments.